The AIM story of Beyond Welfare is an amazing story of inclusion. When I first went there, Lois Smith, one of the founders of Beyond Welfare, took me in the corner and said, you know what we're really trying to do? We're just trying to create the circumstances that people can fall in love with each other. And there are two things that I think are really important as you watch this story about bringing people together in this way. One, of how the labels that people are given, like welfare recipient or disabled or mentally ill, are broken, and how the way of seeing people through clients' eyes becomes a way of seeing people as citizens who have gifts to give. The second point that's really important here is that what starts as a story about helping people on welfare to come off of welfare, which is really, really important, is really recognized more and more by everybody to be a story about changing the community of Ames by doing the work of Beyond Welfare. That everybody becomes different by being a part of this. Everybody's life is transformed.
According to the 2005 U.S. Census, 37 million people in America live in poverty. Of those, over 6 million people are receiving welfare or assistance. Poverty has become a critical and controversial issue. In a consumer-based society, we value the independence created by adequate money, and we're critical of those living without. But regardless of whether someone is working or not, the stigma of living in poverty is overwhelming.
It was hard to be on welfare and hard to be poor. I didn't have a lot of self-esteem to begin with, and being on welfare did not help that. Especially the food stamps and all of that, going to the store and everybody's looking at you and you're handing them your food stamps going, yeah.
Like a failure to society and a burden to society, like a failure to my children, because my children were young at the time.
I felt like people believed that I was never going to be anything, that I was never going to get anywhere, regardless of whether I'd given them that opinion of myself or not. They just automatically already believed that.
So not only are people living in poverty disadvantaged by a lack of resources and opportunities, but emotionally they're affected by the stigma and the attitudes of others. The Department of Human Services enhances the debilitating effects of poverty with a dehumanizing service model.
Going to sign up for services through DHS, you feel, well, first of all, you're a client. You're a problem that needs to be solved in their eyes. That's how you feel. I felt. And so, yeah, you just really feel like you're not worth anything.
It was isolating in a sense to be poor and to only have my family to deal with. Was really, really kind of isolating. You dealt with like the Department of Human Services, but that in itself is a isolating organization to be involved with.
When you're in need, if you go to a government agency, you become a case number. And you're treated with about that much dignity. You become a case number, and there's no difference between 87412 and 87413.
The typical model for providing services to people in poverty is the polar opposite to the values of asset-based community development. The typical model views people living in poverty as a problem that the government needs to fix. DHS and their caseworkers hold all the power while their clients do whatever they can to qualify for support. The agency-client relationship creates a perpetual dependency that further incapacitates those they're trying to serve. Contrast the typical model with the approach taken by Beyond Welfare, and you begin to see the overwhelming impact asset-based community development can have.
I grew up with the idea, and this idea was true in most of my career, is that a group of concerned citizens or bureaucrats or whatever you want to call them would define a problem. And then they would plan how to solve that problem. And then they would find experts or trained people who would do the solution to the problem. But in all that time, no one ever thought about asking the people who had the problem what the problem was and how to solve it. And that was what I saw as being so unique in what Beyond Welfare was doing. Not only that, but instead of making a few people who are so-called experts responsible for the solution to the problem, the responsibility here is to the whole community.
So in Ames, Iowa, overcoming poverty at Beyond Welfare is a community issue. The solution isn't providing people with temporary funds, but is found in helping them to help themselves. In helping them to fight the isolation of poverty and to connect with others. And in helping them realize they have gifts to share and have value to others.
Beyond Welfare is an organization committed to facilitating relationships across class and race and cultural lines, other differences, male-female, abilities, really getting together across our differences in order to be sure everybody has enough money, friends, and meaning. It's how we talk about ending poverty, is everybody has money, friends, and meaning, and that includes getting out of isolation. And also to invite and support the leadership and the voice of people who are typically not heard from. So people who are marginalized in the community or don't usually have a voice.
The fundamental difference between Beyond Welfare and a typical agency is the way in which people in poverty are perceived. Beyond Welfare doesn't feel the need to fix broken people. It believes that everybody has value and assets, and with a supportive community, everybody can find their voice and can work towards their dreams. It all starts on Thursday evening with the Community Leadership Team. The Community Leadership Team is an open invitation to anyone in Ames to join Beyond Welfare for dinner and a meeting. Attending the meeting are people living in poverty, or participants as they're called, and people who have enough money and want to participate in the community, or allies as they're known. The remarkable thing about attending the Community Leadership Team is that it's impossible to tell who's who. Participants and allies look and act the same. It's a real testament to the intentional relationship building that takes place each week. Thursday is a special night in Ames.
This is where we break bread together. That's pretty symbolic, you know. As a family, as a community, let's break bread together. You know, most people can relate to that. I mean, we think of it as Thanksgiving and Christmases, but this is every week here. And this is also where we get concrete needs met without having to go through red tape. You know, if I need a bed, if I need help moving. Since I personally have, since I've been here, I have never had to move once. God bless Cherry, he's been at every one of my moves. So things like that. And it's also a way to have safety.
For a person or family living in poverty and isolation and feeling badly about themselves, there are not a lot of places they can go where they'll feel accepted. Beyond Welfare is very deliberate in the ways in which they build relationships and connect people from diverse backgrounds.
Well, one of the things that we operate out of is a belief that having guiding principles is really important, and then that processes and practice of those processes helps to embed those values and those principles in a community. So we have a lot of things that we do with great regularity, and one of the things that we do every Thursday night, we have a meal together, which of course is a great way for people to build relationships, to eat together, kids, families, elders, everybody. And then the kids go and do kid things, or they're invited to the big circle we sit in. If they want to be in the big circle, they can. If they don't want to, there are kid things to do. And then we have processes that we use. We start with our purpose and principles, which is why are we here? What are our principles, our guidelines, the agreements that we make to treat one another with respect and so on.
Well, we recognize that each and every one of us has special gifts and talents, and we recognize that and support each other in our growth and leadership development.
Leadership, yeah. Then we have another practice called New and Good, where every person says their name out loud, which we think is important, where you're from, and then something good about your life lately. And that really has multiple purposes. There's such an emphasis in our culture on what isn't working, that we feel it's important to look at what's going well, and especially for people in financial poverty, people who are really marginalized, are not usually invited to share what's good about their lives.
Hi, I'm Sheena. I'm from Ames, and I have a couple new and goods this week.
Yay.
So tomorrow's my birthday. I turn 19.
Woohoo!
And I found out this week, me and my friend went to look at a house, and we're gonna go move into it next week. So I'm excited.
All right. Congratulations. And you know what happens when you tell us about birthdays, right?
Oh.
1, 2, 3. Happy birthday to you. So it's a way of helping us focus on the positive and also to know that we are in charge of our thinking. We think it's sort of a radical concept that we can choose our perspective. And that's a practice for choosing our perspective. We have something called listening pairs, where we team up and back and forth give attention on purpose to one another. And it's another gift that we can all give, and it's part of our reciprocity of giving and receiving equally.
But that was really one of the first times outside of my own community that I thought, oh, okay, I'm really not like them either.
So those are some of the sort of rituals that we have.
With Thursday night as a focal point for Beyond Welfare, both participants and allies have an opportunity to build relationships. And when a participant is ready, they can choose to invite allies into their circle of support. It's one more way that the person experiencing the problem can direct the solution.
In a circle of support, which is an individual puts together 3 or 4 people to work with them as a support structure, it's that person who tells them what they need. So the first time they get together early on, they'll do something called a dream path, which is that participant talking about, here's my dream, this is where I want to be, this is where I want to go. In the circle, I mean, they're not there to guarantee, oh, we'll get you there. It's with our gifts and talents, here's what I can offer, here's the kind of support, advice, sometimes material stuff to get you there. But it's not a group of 4 people from the community to say, we're gonna fix you. Okay, we're going to get you better. Here's what you need to do. The job market is very good for executive assistants. So we'd like you to go down to the junior college, take these courses, and you'll be able to earn $28,000 a year. No, that doesn't happen that way. This person says, this is what I want my life to look like, and will you support me around that? And of course, you get the option to say yes or no.
The Dream Path also really does give permission to people who have often lost their dreams or been very disappointed over and over again for a variety of reasons: poverty, mental health issues, violence, marginalization in all kinds of ways. It gives permission to people to have those dreams. And then we use it in the context of a circle of support where allies listen to the dream very deeply. And then as we get more into the planning stage of what are we going to do to support this dream and bring it into fruition, then allies can start to share their thinking and their networks and whatever gifts they're willing to bring to bear to the dream. And this builds the circle. This really gives the circle of support something to organize around and a way to mobilize their caring for one another.
We pulled together people, allies that in the program that had resources to a lot of the types of jobs that I was looking for. And we had our very first meeting, and we did a dream path, and you may hear more about the dream path later, but there were 5 people in the room, and within 1 hour I had probably 10 references to different people to apply for jobs, and support from all those people that just they just believed wholeheartedly that I could do all of these things.
There's been a lot of support.
And what sorts of things do they do for you?
A lot of encouragement, helping me to, you know, listening and talking and giving advice and being supportive and being friends, and just helping me to feel better about myself. So we have little get-togethers once in a while and meet once a month.
I feel that they have grown just as much as I have in this whole process. And they've seen me through a lot of tough things, and my world would not be the same without them.
The Beyond Welfare model is a dramatic change from a typical model. It's an approach that does so much more than support people living in poverty. It's a model that benefits everyone involved and strengthens the community as a whole.
When we look at the changes, not only in people experiencing poverty, but in what we call the allies, the people who intentionally befriend folks in poverty, we're very interested that everyone's changing, that everyone's lives are being affected by our model and by our practice. And that is not typically how people would think about ending poverty. People would typically think about ending poverty as getting people into jobs. And the evidence would show that getting people into jobs is not enough to end poverty. So we're looking at changing people's hearts and people's minds, those in poverty, those not in financial poverty, and by those caring relationships, building a constituency to take on the systemic issues that keep isolation and poverty in place.